Well, hello there, and thank you for tuning in. We'll fix it, team. Now, team because without your support in this channel, it wouldn't be possible. And I hope I can support other people's projects and give aid where necessary. So I consider us a team. We work together. Um, so 2007 Cadillac Escalade got a good old fashioned 6.2. This one does not have the AFM or automatic fuel management lifters, which is probably the best year because you get into, I think, '08, 9, and 10, they got that mess and it just, oh my goodness. But luckily, this is not one of those models. And what we're doing today is the oil pressure sending units malfunctioning, which is kind of common. They actually do give a lot of trouble where they'll just not read and the gauge will go off and it'll have oil pressure. So to get to it, it's a little bit cumbersome. Technically, you probably can fish yourself around back there and get that thing out, but by the time you fool with everything and trying to fight to get in there, it's really, I can pull the intake off one of these things and pretty quick. It doesn't take long. And plus, I can get in there, and these intake gaskets get really old and they start to leak vacuum anyhow. And so, usually, when I do this kind of job, customers will come back and say, "Man, I picked up some fuel mileage and it just runs all the way better." I'm like, well, those old rubber gaskets tend to break down and you seal up some vacuum leaks that are just kind of there. So we're going to do this. We're going to get into it. Let me flip the not phone around here. But I'm just got a few things already off, just so we can get an idea of what we're looking at. I pulled the breather tube off with the that big thing on it that's sticking off of the apparatus that looks like a whatever the heck that is. That helps for a couple of reasons. Technically, if you have a tuned intake where you can kind of control the air as it pulses at lower RPM, you can optimize engine performance vanos on your old BMWs. Whereas that was the thing with valve lift to give it a lot less lift so that you would have a more steady vacuum signal and you pick up low end torque. Well, that's one thing that helps to do. It tunes that, and it helps to knock off some of the harmonics that may come about from your low RPM throttle, where you're actually hearing the vacuum change rapidly as the valves open and close while it's doing its thing. But enough about the air box and why it does that. I've got to get the alternator off. I pull the signal wire off, which I call it the signal wire because it actually helps to differentiate the alternator's load. Whatever you want to call it. I moved this to set it over there. Disconnect the battery before I do, just for the heck of it. I got it. I want that. It shouldn't ground, but we'll just do that for the heck. We'll pull it off and lay it over there, and just be mindful of how brittle the stuff is. It just, all these models, that plastic gets real brittle, so hopefully I can not damage that too much. We're going to be really, really careful and get this intake off, and then I'll show you where the standard unit is, and we'll change that and go back with it. Here we go. Alrighty, here we go. Just gotta be real careful with some of this stuff. I'll try. Want to move fast. So I got to move we're going to pull all these little connectors off of the injector so we can get the, just got to lift this harness off of here. It's okay if they come all the way out, you can snap it back. And that's just, these are just the little safety latches. These are probably the most cumbersome part of the job, is these little connectors, because there's tedious little things to get them snapped. Before we pull this intake, we'll take the air hose and we'll blow along this track on both sides, because there'll be debris sitting there. We don't want that to go into the cylinders. Looking pretty good right there so far. And just kind of lay the wires out like they came off. Don't drop your pokey thingy. You've got some other little stuff going on right here, but that's not a problem. So, let me see here. To keep this short and sweet, so I don't bore you to death, we're just gonna do the same thing on the other side. Get those little connectors all unplugged, and then we'll remove the bolts that I'll show you the quick disconnect using that fuel line right quick too. I'll get to that. Just give me 1 second here. You can find these little tools by itself off the rack there. Let me get this thingy off right up here. I think you can see. Let's see here. Get that. We've got the little safety clip that came off. And just snapped it off. And sometimes I'll pull forward on the line a little bit. I'll show you why. I hope you can see in there. Excuse the narcoleptic camera movement. But you see these little, I don't know what you want to call them, but they're like little latches. That little square piece at the very bottom inside of there, you got a total of 4 of those. And there's a lip on your fuel line connection, and it latches on that lip. And if there's still residual fuel pressure on it, then it can be pulled against that little ledge. Excuse me. And when you try to install this tool to push those back, you might not end up pushing them back. You may end up folding one of them because there's enough pressure there So they say relieve the pressure off the system, but we didn't do that. We're kind of renegades. We just undo the line, but you just pull forward a little bit on it and just relieve the tension off of those little foils that are inside there holding that thing. It makes this removal a whole lot easier. Okay, so other than that, we're just gonna do the same thing on this side. We're gonna pull everything off, take the air hose, blow down each side of the intake so that you can get rid of any debris. And then I'll be right back. We'll get the intake off and we'll take a look. All right, so this is a look at what the underside of the 6.2. As you can see, we just have a regular lifter valley cover. Well, it's not even a lifter valley cover because there's nothing in there. There used to be some knock sensors in these in a few years earlier. This is probably not going to go back. It's just going to make a mess if I try to put it back. I don't get to set the intake straight down on there. So there's the sending unit for the oil pressure right there. Put my hand on it. Reach. Right there. That's it. So I'm going to change that, clean everything all up, and make sure that nothing fell in there. I'll take my hose and blow around out of that, blow stuff out, put it back together with the new gaskets, rock and roll. Try not to knock the camera off. It's barely sitting on the fender. Get my gear wrench fine tooth ratchet and we'll get in here. You want to try to be mindful not to just tug on this thing sideways, because with your new sending unit, you don't want to break the new sending unit. Oh. Yep. Vehicles that have that automatic fuel management, forgive me for saying this, but that thing sounds so funny when they put dual exhaust on it. They put dual exhaust and it goes into AFM, and it just, if they could hear what I hear behind them, they would not put the dual exhaust on it. They would delete that. Anyhow, okay. The cleaning of the block. Move this out the way. This carbon usually is not really hard to get off. Doesn't require a lot of... I'm leaning on my belly, so if I sound like Ernest or somebody in a strain, it's because I'm holding myself up on my belly. And you get the basic idea of what we're doing here. Just a regular wire brush is all that's needed for this. Then I'll make it look real good before it's all said and done with. It's going to look really good when I'm done. Give me a minute here. I'll be right back. All right, so we're now at the point where we're going to reinstall this intake. Let me show you where we're at here. Here's the intake with the new gaskets, seals, whatever you want to call it. I used a wire brush like I did on the motor and a light coat of brake cleaner just to kind of get this stuff brake loose, and I just went around and just cleaned it really well. And here's the top of the blocky block right here. That looks really good. That's really nice and beautiful, and just makes me feel really good to see that. I like seeing clean gasket surfaces. Anyways, Now we've got to set this thing down and start bolting it back in and hooking everything back up. Like Duran says, do 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 do. I went there. Do 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 do. Coffee makes me do do. Happy little tree. Happy little 6'2". All right, so that's now down in the holy hole. That harness kind of drapes back around like that right there. But we'll leave it up like it was just so we can get in there a little bit better. So now I'll just go around and start dropping my retaining bolts back into place. And call it we'll roll right through this. Okay, here we go. So we're bolting this thing on. We're going to go from side to side in a circular motion. Hey, yeah. Drop my socket. This is a little bit cumbersome getting in here because it's just, you got the fuel rail all in the way. But what I'm doing is just going, I went from the middle one right here across from it to the next one down to the one beside it, then across again. Just, in other words, a circular motion, working myself out, or working my way out. Circular motion. Of course, like I said, this isn't the final tightening. This is just getting everything run down, and then I'll take a ratchet and go behind it and make sure we're looking good and all that there and all and whatnot and all. Just moving around in a circular motion. Okay, so now we're really well buttoned up here close to it. I want to show you a little something about putting this back together here that will make life a little easier and probably less expensive. The alternator bracket here, I moved it out of the way so that I could get that intake up and out of there. Now you'll see these things, these are designed to move to take up the space so the alternator stays up against this position here, centers it and keeps it lined up with the pulleys. I gotta drop that thing back down in there, and you've seen I had to take a pry bar to pop it out of there because these didn't want to move very much because of there's some rust that's on there. So what I'm going to do is take a small pair of vice grips. I'm going to clamp right here, and I'm going to bring it together. And then I'm going to tap at the very bottom side of this very, very carefully, because if you just take a hammer and whack that in just a little bit to move it, these things are brittle and they'll break off, and you got a mess on your hands. So I'll show you real quick. Now the alternator should just drop right down in there with the greatest of ease. Now, the next thing I'll do is very carefully tighten this back up. When I start to tighten these bolts, I'm actually gonna, I'll show you. Need more power. But I'm applying a little bit of back pressure right here so I don't, because it's brittle. That aluminum is really, really brittle. And you see that I had a nice little film of rust built up there. we're good there. And we saved our bracket. Plug a little funny wire in. Yeah. And our insulation has held out pretty well. It's looking really good. We didn't break any of this stuff all up, which is nice. We got all the little clips back on and drop the belt back in place and start putting the little tubey tube back in, and we'll start it back up. Okay, here we are. Cold start. First turnover. Let's see how. We're gonna have to turn on the switch and let the fuel rail kind of pump back up. I drained some of the fuel out whenever I had the intake upside down. Turn this radio down a little bit here. Oh yeah. Right. Let's flip the knot phone around. That's real nice. Alrighty, well that looks like a successful repair, and the oil light did go out. When I looked at that, the oil light was just staying on before, the oil pressure light. So now we got that taken care of. That's another one we can put under the old Fix-It belt. Thank you for tuning in, We'll Fix It team. You guys have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful rest of the week, or whatever day you actually see this, weekend if whatever. But thank you much. Y'all have a good one. I'm out.